In today's video, we're going to start building some mood boards and some art direction so that we're ready to begin building pixel art for our game. Hey everybody, my name is Michael. Welcome to episode 1 of chapter 2. So as we begin looking at our world building foundations, there's something really critical I want to talk about, and that's defining our style and our art style, just the visual aspect of this game. It's sometimes hard to place when and where to do things like this and building your levels. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the process at the end of this chapter that is maybe recommended, but there's no hard or fast rule on how to do this. But there are a few things that are important. When we're building a game, we have to make sure that our level design is informed by the gameplay experience that we've designed and that we want. And so for that aspect of it, there's no real visual requirement. But I would also add, and this is from my perspective as an artistic person, that the visual quality, the visual style, and the art direction of your game can also have a pretty heavy influence on those gameplay mechanics and the things that you start building. And so for that reason, I do think it's critically important that we do some of this work, lay this visual groundwork as we start our project. So what I want to start today is I want to look at some examples of some games that I like, and we're going to look at what makes them visually appealing. And then I'm also going to talk about developing my own vision for the game that we're going to be building for the remainder of this tutorial. And you're going to see some of the decisions that I've already previously made that have informed artwork that I've been creating. But this is the process that I would typically go through, and I'm going to show you some steps that you can take to help develop your own visual library as you start working on your game. Okay, so we're going to begin by looking at Hollow Knight Silksong. This is one of the inspirations I'm using to help me and guide me throughout the development of this tutorial. Now, there's some things that are excellent about this game, but there's also some things about this game that I don't want to follow. So one thing you'll notice, obviously we're watching a little intro cutscene to the game here. The game Silksong has a really, I would say, cartoony visual style. It's high res, it's HD, but it's also low res in the sense that the characters, the levels, the designs are very simple and somewhat geometric, right? Not a lot of shading. Not a lot of colors, really simple shapes. We've got the hero here in this cage. And I think a lot of this is really appealing. Now, if you want to go for this style of game, you can. And I don't want to go for this style in the sense of the general art style, right? Because obviously I'm making a pixel art game and maybe a little bit more retro feel. Okay, so as we look at this, let's just keep that in mind. I don't know how many of you played this. I'm struggling to make it through this game. And I have to be completely honest. I think the gameplay feels great. There's something about the style of the game that doesn't draw me in as much as other games. And that's more of a preference thing, really, because I think they've done a great job. I would love to make an intro cinematic like this too for our game. That might be like an extra that we could do someday. Something like this is hard. That's obviously a lot of time from artists. So here we go. Act 1. And I'm not playing. We're just watching right now. But I want to look at how they set up this initial environment. This initial environment includes a lot of things that I want to bring into our game. You can see the particles, like the rains, the dirt. That's fun when the spear or the sword falls, or the spike, whatever it's called. We've got nice parallaxing environment where we've got foreground and background, and you'll see that they're going to move. That parallax is what we call that effect when there's the appearance of 3D depth, even though it's like a 2D game. But you can see pretty strongly the 2D art direction of this that I mentioned, right? It's very cartoony, very smooth and crisp lines. You can see that it's still really borrows from traditional platformers. It's got harsh corners on its platforming ground, and it's really easy to see the foreground for the most part. Now, one thing that Hollow Knight and Silksong tend to do as well is they have a pretty strong color scheme defined, and it's kind of something that varies a little bit per area. So there's some continuity, consistency throughout all of the worlds, but like this intro level is very green. And the foreground, the background, it's very green. It's an analogous color scheme. All the colors are just variations of that shade of green, right? With the exception of the gray, but even that gray's got a green hue because of the lighting. We've got the light streams, we've got little particles floating, and they've done a really wonderful job just bringing you into this world. Now, there's one thing that I mentioned. They've got these kind of traditional looking platforms, and while I don't dislike that, I want some depth to the platform itself. You've already seen that in the example video I put out. Okay, whereas this one you can see our character, whatever the character's name is in Silksong, is just standing right on top of the platform. I'll show you what I mean with a later example, but this is beautiful. You could adapt a lot of the concepts and things here to a pixel art style game as well, if you wanted to. Okay, so there's no reason that you couldn't do this. Or if you want to do an HD style, how we're building our game currently would allow for that. I think there's a little bit more work involved. HD is a little bit harder, and it relies a little bit more on your artistic talent than pixel art does. That's not to say that the pixel art doesn't require artistic talent. I think it's just easier to see a pixel art and learn how to reproduce it than it is to learn how to reproduce something like this. So now that we've looked a little bit at Hollow Knight Silksong, I want to look at Casltevania Symphony of the Night. This is easily one of my favorite, Castlevania games, Metroidvania games. This does have kind of that same hard-edged platform that our Hollow Knight game has. But obviously this is a pixel art style. This is like an HD pixel art style, I'd say. This was a game that was developed later on in the, lifespan of the traditional... Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the gameplay. But the traditional pixel art games, right? So there's more color depth. There's a little bit more detail. We've got fancy effects in the background and things like that. And I'd like to mimic that in a lot of ways. Okay? One thing that's really cool about Symphony of the Night is the highly detailed animations in the player. Okay, and you've got the cool trailing effect when he's jumping and all that kind of stuff, right? And we're going to mimic a few of those things to some degree. But actually, I like the gameplay feel of Hollow Knight game a little bit more for our tutorial, okay? And so it's going to be kind of a blend of some of the visuals, something like this, and maybe the gameplay of Silksong, but obviously right now we're focused on the visual. I think those platforms, let's rewind just a second. These little broken pillars actually kind of break. Let's just stop it right here. They kind of break the style that the game generally has, because you can see that there's a little bit of depth. That really what it is there's like a little bit of the pillar behind the pillar, but it gives this sense of depth where he lands somewhere right here, right? So watch where he lands on this. Yeah, you saw that, right? He's just kind of sitting on the edge a little bit. I like that. So the interior areas in this game don't have a whole lot of depth to the background, and that's fine. That makes some of the areas easier to create from an artistic perspective, but there's still a lot of color depth. This one's cool. You've got the window back here, right? So there is some depth to this particular scene. Very linear. Not a lot going on here, just a corridor of zombies. Let's go back. There's some cool things in the design here that I want to point out that we can use when we think about art direction. We've got areas here where this hints that maybe there's a way for the player to get down there, right? And I believe you can in this game. It's been so long, you turn into a wolf or something. But obviously, initially in the game, you can't go underneath small areas. So your art and your visual decisions do influence and are influenced by the gameplay mechanics, I guess is what I want to point out there. But I think this is a really good example of pixel art style games that I love. And again, we're going to mimic a lot of the stylistic things here in the art that I create for this tutorial. So we're going to have a higher color depth and a little bit more detail in some of the sprites. You don't have to do that yourself. That's just what I'm going to go for. So as I'm looking for references, this is a big one for me. Okay, a game I haven't played, but I've always found really visually appealing is this Owlboy game. And let's just look at this. This game has that HD pixel art kind of look, right? It's pixel art, but there's a lot of detail in it. You'll also notice that our little Owlboy is on a platform that has some depth. You can see a cast shadow beneath him. And, the platform that he's standing on is not just a hard edge. You can kind of see it a little bit. And that's what I really want. So this game is a big inspiration for me when it comes to the visual qualities of what I want to build. Let's just go ahead and watch this for a little bit. There's some really great things happening here. We've got little particles like those fly-like things that are flying around. I love how the plants move. Even the grass on the ground, on the platforms, wiggles. We're not going to necessarily do that here, but that's something we totally could do. Lots of movement in the environment. One thing that's worth pointing out is that they still maintain that traditional style of platforms where you can see kind of, once there's the edge of the platform, it quickly fades to a dark color. It's not black, but it's basically black, right? It's like a blackish color. And that's something that we're going to mirror too. That helps with the level design, because as a player, you can tell all that black area, you're not focused on it. It's not distracting you. It's not confusing what you can land on and what you can't, or where you can walk, right? Those are important things to consider as we develop art styles for our video games. There's some really great art in this. I love the little dust plumes that fly from Owlboy as he walks, and that explosion was nice when you defeat the enemy there. Okay, this is a good game. Really good style overall. I mean, these games all are really awesome, each in their own unique ways, right? Visually, the audio in these games, which is not something we're fully addressing or really discussing in this chapter. We'll do that in a later chapter. But yeah, this is something that I'm really inspired by. Just wanted to fast forward here. Here's an interior area. I really love this. You can still see that depth to the floor. In this particular area, that floor is extended all the way till it, meets the walls of the building. So that's kind of cool. That gives it a unique visual flair that you kind of miss from other platforming games. They've still got the nice harsh fall off to black at the bottom and around the edges of the screen, so it really encompasses what's playable. Serves as a visual frame as well. It's kind of cool. Let's just look at this a little bit more. Same kind of concept here. You can see there's depth to the platform that he's on. We've even got nice lighting happening here. The whole screen is darkened. Even our player is darkened, and that's something that we'll mimic. So there's like a lighting going on. It allows the lights in that building. Let's rewind and just look at that real quick. So, these lights, they're just a yellow color. They're not that bright, but because everything's dark, it makes it look as though the building's illuminated from the inside. Really nice. You can see the sense of depth given by the parallax. It's not overdone in this one. It's not so much parallax and depth as something like Silksong or Hollow Knight, but it's still enough to sell that illusion, right? Let's just rewind one more time and let's just look at those stars again. Just look how the stars and the clouds and everything kind of move at different speeds to give that illusion of depth. You can see that, this cloud and this cloud, they're moving differently, and then the stars in the background. So with just like 3 layers of parallax, or maybe even just 2 there, maybe the one cloud was moving with the level, you get a lot of depth from that. Okay, so this is what I would call like a key reference for the style that I'm going for with my Metroidvania. Okay, so what do? We've got some inspiration, right? I've kind of pointed out some things that I like. Where do we go from there, and what do we need to do? There's actually several ways you can approach this. Okay, and so I'm just going to show some things that I have done, and I don't always do these, but these are good tools that you can use to kind of help you. So we're going to create a mood board, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use Affinity, because this is a tool that's free, and so a lot of you will appreciate that. So, go grab that, or if you want to use Photoshop, any other option that you want to use, that's okay. What we're going to be doing is creating this mood board, which is a collection of images and maybe even color that help describe the feeling, the environment, and the visual style of our game. So let me just open Affinity here. And I recently started using this when they went free. They were purchased by Canva. I hope that they continue to be a good tool. I've always thought Affinity was pretty great. Okay, you can make a new file. I'm going to open an existing one, but because this is not an Affinity tutorial, but if you went to new, you could pick your canvas size. I tend to work with like a screen resolution when I'm doing this kind of work. And so you can see I've got one file here that I've been working with. And it's got a few screenshots that I liked that relate to texture and color. And I don't even know what this game is, but it's got that same depth. It's got nice vibrant colors. Same with this game with the snail. Here's Owlboy, a nice little Owlboy reference. But I'm just taking some really key pieces of art that I'm going to use as inspiration. And they all have different things that I love. I love the trees in this example in the forest. I like the color. I like the way they've done the depth fade with very simple colors and just silhouettes of trees. This game has a similar thing with the trees. They're detailed in front and then they become silhouettes pretty quickly. And you know, this is Chasm, I believe, is what this game is called. This one a little bit more detailed, but they do eventually go to those silhouettes. But just in general, I love the feeling of these, the ambience that it gives, as well as the color palettes that they tend to use. Now, as we're pulling our art, it's important for us to consider where our game is happening and what kind of things we're going to be doing. And so I only have one reference that relates to a big portion of the game that I think I'll build, and that's this dungeon here. I like how they've done the bricks and whatnot. Maybe not my ideal piece of key art or concept art for those, but just something that I found inspirational. So what you can do, and if you're in Affinity, what's nice is you can have multiple of these artboards at once. And so you can come up here in the top and you might not have as many options, but they're underneath this little menu, right? We've got vector, pixel, layout, etc. I'm going to just come over to layout. It makes it easy to make new pages. I'm going to add like a new page right here. And I'm just going to add one. Say okay, and then I'm going to drag it up, actually up here. I kind of want it up here. Okay, so there's the map. Okay, so we've got this new page. I'm going to go ahead and go up to page 1 and just take this fill layer and I'm going to copy it and come to page 2 and paste. So I've got the same background. Just Control C, Control V, typical copy and paste commands. But with this artboard, I want to fill in, I want to do some research with you and I want to kind of fill this in and show you how I might go about this. Because what I'm lacking here is maybe some good references of that Owlboy platforming, because this is the only one I've got, but this is going to be one of my primary inspirations, and this is a pretty low quality image as well. This one is cool though. It's got an immense sense of depth. You've got this massive foreground grass and you've got this platform area here and then the hills. Pretty cool. But let's go ahead and let's just open a browser and let's look at some Owlboy art. Okay, I'm going to come in here. Let's just look up. You can see I've been searching some things. Let's go to Owlboy. Okay, images is all we really need. I just want to get some great images that show what I love about Owlboy. I think this is one that stands out right here, right? This image with, I don't know what to call this, but this little building, this house thing. Okay, it's not looking very good quality right now. Let's go ahead and open that in a new tab and see what we get. There we go. Let's copy this image. I'm going to go back to Affinity and just paste it into my board. So I've got page 2 here. Let's just paste it. One thing that I like about Affinity is it's pretty easy to just drag these things around without losing quality and stuff like that. So, okay, this is a great image. It's got that platform reference. It's got those bright colors that I'm wanting. It's just good all around. Now, let's see what else they've got on this review page for Owlboy. Let's see. Ooh, that one's really, really cool, actually. A lot of sense of depth here. I'm guessing that this floor even parallaxes in a 3D fashion. Probably not something we'll do, but let's copy this image. I don't really think I love the style of the architecture in that area, but I think just the general sense of what that is. I'm going to get a few more references maybe from Owlboy, if there's anything that stands out. Let's go ahead and go back. Okay, Owlboy. My game's going to be outside and then in the castle and in some dungeons of the castle, right? That's kind of what I'm going for. So we're thinking stones, and I'm probably not going to find a lot of good castle architecture from this Owlboy game. Again, I haven't played it, but I don't believe there's a whole lot of that. Although here's something interesting. I'm going to go ahead and copy this image here and bring it over. I think what I like about this one is the color scheme. I really like all these rocks. This is a lot of detail to put into your artwork. And really what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take baby steps towards that, right? You may not build it quite as beautiful and detailed until you know that the art and the level design works together. But this one's unique because we've got this platform here, but it's different and it's stone now. You can see where this guy's standing, okay? And I really like this round area that kind of gets cut in half so you can see the cross section of it. That's really cool. And this background pixel art is just absolutely beautiful in this. Okay, so we're collecting some images here. Maybe what we need to do at this point is I need to Dang, that's cool. I need to look at what I'm looking for in particular. I need some dungeons and castles. So let's do pixel art, levels, dungeon, something like that. Okay. Let's just look at a couple of these. Surprisingly, this one is not bad. Let me go ahead and copy that. I like it. It's got the depth that we want. It's got this kind of dungeony background. I might remove it because I don't think it quite fits the vibe I'm going for, but it's a good start. Okay. This is cool, but this doesn't look like an actual game. This here, Dreams Time. Hey, this is that one I had already in my board. Kind of fun. Somebody's pixel art designs here. I'm just kind of clicking through to get the recommended images. I really like this one. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Just paste it in here. Make it a little bit bigger maybe. I wish the image quality were a little bit better. I like the color scheme of this. It's a little bit hard to tell what's a platform and what isn't though. So again, might remove that. But see, this is a process. We're just going through and this is great. This is wonderful. I'm going to copy that one. Going through and finding inspiration. We'll eventually weed things out until we just have what we need to design our game. You know, what fits our vision. I really, really love these arches. I've got some arches similar to this I've already designed, but these ones are just awesome. Love that. I love the torch. If anybody remembers what these cages are called, go ahead and comment. I cannot remember. All right. Oh, if we were making a top-down game right now, look at that. That's pretty beautiful looking. Okay, I'm going to do one more search here. I'm going to include Casltevania in this. I'm really going for a Casltevania style game. That might make it too directly pointing at a Casltevania art, but see that the downside is I want a slightly more modern look to my pixel art than the Casltevania. Some of you are going to want that retro look. Okay. This is just so blurry. Let's look at this guy. That's pretty cool. Let me copy this. Even though this image doesn't have all of the... Dang, that's a big image. Even though this image doesn't have all of the, you know, stylistic choices I want, like the style of platform and whatnot, it does have a really good sense of detail and contrast. And this is a great reference. I'm going to keep that. You can see how they've made their tileable, repeatable patterns with their bricks, and they look nice. They don't look too jarring to look at. Same with these floors. Really wonderful pixel art here. Okay. So go ahead and do the same. Once you've gathered what you want, you're going to want to kind of curate it, maybe remove some things. You know, this one, I'm not liking it so much. I'm going to keep a lot of the stuff in here, but this is just going to become my mood board for castle areas. And then I've got a mood board that really relates more to the foresty areas. So maybe I'll just swap this, a couple images here so that they fit the theme of the areas a little bit better. And you might want a mood board per locale area within your game. That's something you can do. Okay. Gives you an idea of what kind of color palette you might be going for, what kind of, you know, style you want for the platforms, for the areas, props, decorations, etc. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and shovel this around. I'm not going to make you watch me do all that. Okay. I've got my little board laid out here. We've got two, in fact. You know, you can think of this as just reference for colors, styles, etc. Like I said, it's kind of like your shopping cart of what you are going to pull from as you're designing your game. Now, we're not going to copy these directly, but I made a comment earlier how pixel art style is a lot easier to look at and analyze and see how they made their art so that you can reproduce something similar. And just to give an example of that, right? If we just look at this Casltevania image, well, given I scaled it kind of funky, let's use this one. You can kind of see how the pixels are. There's some blurry things happening here that maybe aren't accurate to the actual pixel art, but you can see what they drew, and you could sample a color and just make a simple line, and it's pretty straightforward. Now there is some lighting happening here, which is affecting the colors of the sprites and the sprite sheets, but in general, you get a sense of how they built it just by looking at it. And so it makes it easy to reproduce, you know, looking at these edges and how do they fade the bricks out. These are all great examples of what you can do as you're making your own. Okay, so we've got textures, patterns, colors. You may even want to come in here and make some color swatches, you know, like, let me just make like a box, and you could sample a color, just pick a color, like maybe you're like, I really, really, really want this gray, you know, whatever. And then if you're doing more traditional pixel art, you're going to limit your color palette really strictly. I would recommend that you pick a few key colors, and even for something like these rocks, I like how Owlboy does it. There appears to only be, if it weren't blended and blurred by the scaling, there's probably around the area of 5 to 7 colors that they really are actually using to make that. And you could do it with fewer. You could do it with like 3 colors, you know, your main color, a highlight color, and a shadow color, maybe a 4th for the black if you're fading out, something like that. But you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and actually make a quick little color palette. I love this blackish color that they use. You can see it's black in the game, but it's kind of red. Let's get their highlight color here. Okay, I'm going to get a few flavors of color, and then we can always blend in between them more. I'm going to just get one more color right here. It's probably this in-between bluish color. There we go. Okay, so you can see how this can serve as a color palette as I'm going through making my games. And now if I'm trying to decide what color to make something, it's a lot easier to choose from these 4 than it would be to just like pick a random color and try and get it to match that mood. I've just simplified really quickly. These are the colors that match the mood for my dungeon, right? Okay, so I've gone ahead and just made a little quick color palette from these references as well, and you could expand that, but just some basic color ideas to pull color swatches that give the vibe of this. I've got the colors from this. Now I've got this other page that you saw poking through maybe a little bit earlier. This is my character reference. We're not going into the character design in this chapter, but you can see I've drawn heavily from this particular artistic style. So when we look at our hero, he draws from that. You can make as many of these boards as you want to just give you that visual direction and that inspiration you need. You know, you should have maybe a page for enemies and inspiration on what they're going to look like. And by doing this, you are helping inform yourself. You're creating a visual library so that when you go to create your pixel art, you've got a sense of what you want to do. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to make decisions. It's going to give you clarity, and it's going to give you things to fall back on when you don't know what to do with your own art. Okay? Okay, so another thing that we should do is maybe start building a little map. We've got different areas that we're going to have in our world, and it's nice to kind of start laying things out so that as we start building our levels, we know what we want to do. And so generally I like to make a rough map myself and kind of give myself an idea. I don't treat this map as like a hard and fast rule, and as I'm designing my game, if I realize an area should be bigger, smaller, or whatever, or connected differently, then I'll change that. Just knowing that eventually I'm going to have a map that's updated and matching that I can use in my game, right? But as we get started, I'm still in Affinity here, just in the vector mode, and I've got these little rectangles that represent like a camera's view, a screen, so minimum size for a level, as well as these little yellow boxes I'm going to use to represent doors. Here, let me just move these over. So what I'm going to probably do is start outdoor, and in Affinity you can just, while you're holding control, just click and drag and it'll make a copy. But the first area is going to be a little bit longer, kind of a long area, and I would say the same for the second area. And I'm just going to move this so that they're like touching, and then hold shift and hit right. You know, these two areas are just going to connect just like this, side to side. Okay, so pretty straightforward, right? I'm just creating a map. And then eventually we're going to have our areas connect to the castle or something along those lines. And then I've got orange, you know, I've just color coded something up here. I'm thinking orange is kind of like a dungeon kind of area. So it's part of the castle, but it's more like the underground, the crypts or something like that. And the purple will be like the castle itself. Okay, so we might have castle rooms here. And then this green box I'm reserving for like where I save my game. So there's going to be specific rooms where I want to have where you can rest or whatever to save and restore your health. So that's what the green one is. I'm going to always keep them a screen size. I'm not going to ever make them bigger. They'll be kind of like a generic type of room. Okay. But really, you can just come in here and just start having fun. You can make these big, small. It doesn't really matter. You could have a giant room if you want. And then we're going to want to also label some of them as though they're a boss room. I'm just going to fast forward and show you what I've created for my starting map for this tutorial. Okay, so this is the map I've come up with. Just a couple outdoor areas. You know, we might want more. We've got a few dungeon areas, a B for a boss. Maybe we've got some boss rooms at the top of the castle and here in the dungeon. And these rooms will probably reward you with some ability. We've got our save rooms and showing how they're connected throughout the level, right? So we've just got 3. They're distributed somewhat evenly. These 2 are close, but when it comes to, you know, entrances and being able to access them, they're not so close, right? You got to move around a little bit. Okay. So this is the starting map that I think I'm going to start building for this series. And you should be able to do something like this with some sort of tool. I mean, you could even do this on pen and paper. It doesn't have to be digital. Obviously, digital is easy to change and whatnot, but many people start by sketching ideas on a notepad or whatever, or on a napkin, and then they bring it in here. Okay, so there we have it. This is the basic process that I go through. Now you can go through and add a little bit more to these. You know, you might want to add a description to each of these areas that gives a verbal, you know, description of the art direction that you want for it. Like maybe here you say like dank and wet dungeons, or here you've got something like, you know, warm, beautiful, foresty environments, something like that. And then as you go through, you're going to develop this. Do what you feel like you want for your game, and figure out what makes sense to you. How many areas do you think you'll have? What's the inspiration for them? And that's your homework assignment. Go ahead and build out your artboards, get your art references, find your inspiration that's going to help you define your world, and start working on a little map that shows how these different areas are interconnected. And then you can go further as well and add enemies, characters, bosses, reference for those types of things as well as you see fit. Okay. And then in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to use these to start building our first tile set. We're going to work in Sprite. We're going to start drawing and creating the different platforms and tiling platforms so that you're able to bring those into Godot and build the game. Okay. So thank you for following along. I hope this was informative. I know some of you are probably wondering how you can implement this. If you've got questions about how this is useful, or you want to see a demonstration of something, you know, I didn't do any concept art creation. That's something that's a little bit harder to demonstrate, I think. But, you know, let me know what you're interested in. Maybe that's what it is. It's concept art, or maybe you want to see something else and related to my creative process. So go ahead and drop those in the comments. And as always, thanks for following along. Subscribe if you're new so that you can see when my next video comes out. And we'll see you next time.